Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little video that I found particularly interesting. And apparently, in recent news, at least according to Blue Blood Sports TV, there is a possibility that Canelo Alvarez he may stick to his original plans, or at least his original guns, to what overall he said he was going to do in the year 2021. And as that is possibly first to face off with Ilunga Makabu, or all in all, at least maybe to see how his fight goes. Now, I believe Ilunga Makabu, I believe that he will be fighting sometime within the next couple weeks. I believe that he has a mandatory against another African fighter, of course, from the continent of Africa when it comes down to it. And I believe if he's able to be successful in that fight, there is a possibility that Canelo Alvarez will take that fight against Ilunga Makabu. And personally, in my opinion, I really don't have a problem with that. Of course, there's going to be a certain amount of people out there, and they've been trying to confirm things when it comes down to it about, oh, well, Canelo, he is going to face JERMALL CHARLO, he isn't going to face JERMALL CHARLO, or who he's going to face next. I don't really know who Canelo Alvarez is going to face next, but if I had to guess, once again, the three likely options, I think it's either going to be JERMALL CHARLO, if he's going to face someone within the lighter weight classes, or someone, near his own size. If he's going to face someone within the light heavyweight division first, it probably is going to be that of Joe Smith Jr. That's just a fight that makes sense. That would be a good comeback for him at the light heavyweight division. Joe Smith Jr. is a person to where he's not an A-grade skilled boxer, but he is very, very dangerous. He's a person that, he has A-grade power, and he doesn't have the worst skills in the world. He's not an A-grade boxer, like I said, in my opinion, but he is the WBO light heavyweight champion, and he's a person that has real, real power. And on top of that, of course, there is Ilunga Makabu, who is a very potential candidate. And if Canelo, of course, were able to get a fight with Ilunga Makabu and were able to become a five-weight division champion and able to defeat Ilunga Makabu, that pretty much would cement Canelo Alvarez's name in the history of boxing. I mean, his name, in my opinion, like I said, it's already going to be cemented in the history of boxing anyway. And once again, I'm not someone that is just this Canelo Alvarez fanboy, even though I have done quite a bit of Canelo Alvarez videos as of lately. But I just thought that I would do it because, of course, that's kind of the hot topic at the current moment in time. There will be other topics, of course, to talk about a little bit later on. Of course, tomorrow, I believe, is Saturday, and the NFL playoffs will be starting. So, of course, I'll be talking about that a little bit as well, probably coming next week or maybe even this weekend, but we'll see what happens there. But anyways, when it comes down to it, Mr. Blue Blood Sports TV, he's going to be talking about Mr. Canelo Alvarez and the possibility of him actually sticking to his guns and facing Ilunga Makabu. I'm going to tune in.
What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So we got some interesting news. As four-division world champion Mexican superstar boxer, who's currently the undisputed super middleweight world champion, Saul Canelo Alvarez, who's considered to be the face of the sport of boxing. Canelo Alvarez is also considered to be top three best pound-for-pound fighters in the world with a record of 50.
Actually, he's considered to be number one pound per pound. It just is what it is. Now, I get where Mr. Blue Blood Sports TV is going. I don't always necessarily disagree with what Mr. Blue has to say. But when it comes down to it, in my opinion, you can kind of tell that he wishes or he wants either Terrence Bud Crawford or Earl Spence Jr. to be at that number one pound per pound spot. And I get it at the end of the day. And of course, a lot of these channels, I'm not sure Blue Blood if he's promoting this narrative as much, but we all know what a certain amount of these new media channels especially try to allege, and that's why it's very hard to take them seriously, because they'll basically allege this with any fighter that is of a different demographic. Now, with certain fighters that may be of a different demographic than fighters of color, of course, black fighters, it can be true that there can be certain things as very, very hyped up fighters just to put over black fighters, but Canelo Alvarez, he's not one of those fighters, or at least not completely. Basically, what am I saying? He's not just some big Caucasian or Latino hope. He's someone that is a real deal fighter. When you take a look at his fighting style, when you take a look overall at how he can fight and how he breaks down his opponents and, his skill set, Canelo is one of the greatest fighters that I've personally ever seen. To be quite honest with you, when it comes down to it, just with my 10 plus years of watching boxing, if you're talking about, or if you're discussing with me, if you were to ask me who are the top 5 greatest boxers that you personally ever seen with your own 2 eyes live, I would say number 1 would probably be Floyd Mayweather Jr. At the current moment in time, I would say that number 2 would have to be Manny Pacquiao. And number 3, to be quite honest with you, would have to be Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez. To be quite honest with you. After that, I don't really know overall who to put. Andre Ward might be up there. And there might be a couple of others that I'm personally missing. Now some people, they may ask, what about Terrence Crawford or a couple of others, Vasily Lomachenko? Those guys are great fighters, but I think that they have to be a little bit more proven overall to be on that type of list. If you're asking for a fifth boxer, I don't know, maybe I would put someone like a Juan Manuel Marquez or Miguel Cotto up there just because, I thought that they were highly skilled and I kind of got to see the final parts of their career. But when it comes down to it, all in all, bottom line is this. Canelo, like I said, he is an all-time great. And I do think that if he were to beat Ilunga Makabu, I think that that actually would be a very, very great move for his career. Like I said, there's not a lot of fighters in the history of boxing, whether you believe that Canelo was on PEDs or not. And I've stated this multitude of times. I believe that more than likely he probably is on something. But like I said, I believe that a certain amount of these boxers are as well, or other boxers are as well. Like I said, very, very tough to determine who is on PEDs and who is not on PEDs. Unless someone just looks completely different, than before. And Canelo, in my opinion, he's always been somewhat consistent with his skill set. Do I believe that there's a possibility that maybe he was always on PEDs? There's a certain possibility of that, but like I said, I believe that there's been a certain amount of fighters within the history that have been on PEDs. Like I said, I believe that Manny Pacquiao was on PEDs, but I cannot disgrace him completely as an all-time great fighter. It just is what it is. Like I said, a lot of these athletes out here, they're on something anyway. That doesn't mean that every single one of them is on it, but what that is me saying is that, like I said, the PED argument to me, it can only go so far. Unless maybe you're like a John Jones or something where you've been caught on it so many goddamn times to the point to where we clearly know that you're, probably more than likely a current user or, what the hell's the word that I'm looking for? A recurrent user, And I believe that Canelo more than likely, like I said, is on something. But at the end of the day, you can tell that Canelo Alvarez, he is debatably the most skilled fighter on the planet. Just is what it is.
7 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws, 39 big wins by way of knockout. He is 31 years of age, 5'8" with a 70-inch arm reach. With that said, this past week there was a lot of buzz surrounding Canelo Alvarez as ESPN reported that Canelo Alvarez could be facing off against 2-time undefeated, 2-division world champion, reigning WBC middleweight world champion, superstar boxer Jermall Lions Only Charlo in his next fight. Jermall Charlo had been seeking out a fight with Canelo Alvarez for quite some time since both guys campaigned at the junior middleweight 154-pound limit. Jermall Charlo, 32 wins, no losses, no draws, 22 wins by way of knockout. He too is 31 years of age, 6 feet tall with a 74-inch arm reach. With that said, ESPN reported that Jermall Charlo and Canelo Alvarez had entered negotiations, and that Jermall Charlo, he was awaiting this week to mull over the options and the offer from Canelo Alvarez for a May 7th Cinco de Mayo weekend showdown, and Jermall Charlo will move up to super middleweight 168 and challenge Canelo Alvarez. Again, Jermall Charlo has been looking to face Canelo Alvarez since they was at 54. He became Canelo Alvarez mandatory at 160, but Canelo Alvarez, that's when the WBC introduced the franchise title to the sport of boxing, which saw Canelo Alvarez be...
Like I said, when it comes to the Jermall Charlo fight, I personally would love to see the Jermall Charlo fight, and I think that it would do great numbers, probably greater numbers than the Makabu fight, but like I said, I can't get after Canelo Alvarez too much for going after cruiserweight, because Canelo, almost whatever weight class that he goes after, unless he's going after Tyson Fury or something like that when it comes down to it, he's pretty much going to be favored in whatever matchup that he's in. So what does that mean? I don't think that he's just going up to cruiserweight just to duck some of the lower weight class fighters, because I don't think Canelo, I don't truly think he believes that Jermall Charlo and what the hell is his name, David Benavidez, I don't actually think that he believes that they're legitimate threats. There's been certain times to where, sure, he's said certain things like, oh, those fights don't interest me or they don't fight anybody, but to be honest with you, this is just my personal opinion, and I'm not trying to make excuses here or anything, but there's just certain fighters that when they say that, it's just, it may sound bad. It's kind of like Terrence Bud Crawford when he talks about, Errol Spence Jr., they may talk about, he may talk about, Terrence Crawford. They may insult each other's resumes, or they may say that, or they may say, oh, well, there's no reason for me to fight this dude when it comes down to it. But I don't think that they necessarily mean that they're afraid of that dude. I just think it means all in all that if I were to ever fight that dude, I would whoop their ass. I think that's basically what some of those fighters mean. And I think when Canelo takes a look at Jermall Charlo and David Benavidez, he just doesn't see anything there all in all that he's not already dealt with. When I take a look at David Benavidez, he is very athletically gifted, but when it comes down to, like I said, I just think his defense is too poor. He's too hittable. I don't think that he has the chin that he would need to sustain the damage needed from Canelo Alvarez. And like I said, David Benavidez, he just doesn't have the A-grade power that some of the other fighters. I don't even think that he has the power of a JERMALL CHARLO, to be quite honest with you. So, like I said, like I was reviewing a video by Chronicles of Judo 144 yesterday, and he said that he didn't even think David Benavidez would last 5 rounds. I would have to disagree with that a little bit, but what I will say is this. I think that Canelo, like I said, to me, that fight would probably end up similar to the Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. fight, or like a better version of it. I think David Benavidez possibly could maybe pull out a couple rounds just in terms of competitiveness, but he's just too straightforward. He doesn't have A-grade head movement. He doesn't have A-grade feet when it comes down to it. Very gifted athlete, very gifted fighter in terms of athleticism, but in terms of raw, just A-grade skills, no, he don't have it compared to Canelo. It just is what it is. That doesn't mean that I would not want to see the fight, but I don't think that Canelo is super duper interested in them right now. I think that right now he's taking a look at Ilunga Makabu. I think that that is the perfect way to go. Not only all in all, is that going to be an excellent fight overall for your legacy, because you could possibly win a title at cruiserweight, but I think that Canelo after that is planning to move up to 175, and I've been saying this for a while.
Franchise JERMALL CHARLO awarded the super title, and the rest is history. JERMALL CHARLO has since defended the title, so on and so forth. With that said,
what JERMALL CHARLO, in my opinion, what he would be, he'd be like a slightly better version of Danny Jacobs. That's what he would be. Like I said, what JERMALL CHARLO reminds me of, just in terms of comparing him to other fighters, he reminds me of a bigger version of Danny Garcia. And Danny Garcia, he's never usually won any of the A-grade fights, at least at welterweight. I think that JERMALL CHARLO is somewhat the same. It just is what it is. I think that maybe he would have more of a chance to last with Canelo, or at least survive against Canelo, just because, he does have that power to maybe exchange a little bit with Canelo, and maybe Canelo would respect him a little bit more than what he did playing under Billy Joe Saunders. But Charlo just doesn't have the footwork. He doesn't have the head movement. He doesn't have the defensive responsibility. He doesn't have the slickness. This is why I said, these people that try to, feed you this. Don't get me wrong. Once again, I would still love to see the fight. It's still a fantastic matchup. But it's a fantastic matchup in the way that, like, like I'm trying to think of a fight here. It's a fantastic matchup in the way as if, say, Terrence Bud Crawford versus Josh Taylor is a fantastic matchup. It's a good matchup on the surface. A lot of people would want to see it. But no one really thinks that Josh Taylor is going to beat Terrence Bud Crawford. You know what I'm saying? It's a 70-30 matchup. So that's why I'm saying, if Canelo goes after Ilunga Makabu to make history in a fight to where he is going to be favored, so this is not a Mikey Garcia slithering in and out of the weight division situation where, Canelo has not fought some of the other top contenders, has not fought some of the biggest threats out there. Because, like I said, JERMALL CHARLO, David Benavidez, to me, they're pretty much just as big of threats as some of the other contenders that Canelo has fought. It just is what it is.
Everybody wants to know what's next for Canelo Alvarez, okay? Everybody's interested to see what's the next move for Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez trainer, longtime trainer, well-renowned trainer, two-time trainer of the year, Eddie Reynoso. He stated that Canelo Alvarez is still mulling over his options and that he did not enter full negotiations with any fighter as of yet, okay? But he stated that JERMALL CHARLO was definitely an option, but they hadn't entered negotiations yet, as of yet. Well, now today, Eddie Reynoso is supposed to, he stated that he's scheduled to meet with Canelo Alvarez this week, stated that Canelo Alvarez is on vacation. This has been backed up by Matchroom CEO and promoter Eddie Hearn, who co-promotes with Canelo Alvarez on DAZN. And Eddie Hearn, he stated that Canelo Alvarez is in Miami on vacation. Eddie Reynoso said that Canelo Alvarez is enjoying vacation. And they're going to go over what's next with Canelo Alvarez. Well, now it seems like the recent reports is that Canelo Alvarez is going to wait for cruiserweight Mukabu, who is the WBC cruiserweight champion, to successfully defend his titles January 29th. After he successfully defends his title, should he be successful, that's going to be the option for Canelo Alvarez, is to go up to cruiserweight, look to become a 5-division world champion, and capture that WBC title from Mukubu at the cruiserweight limit. Okay. Now Eddie Hearn himself, he put out a statement today as well.
I don't know why it's so hard to pronounce this guy's names for many of these channels. To me, it's only like there's only one or two ways to pronounce it. It's either Makabu or overall. Shit, I forgot the other way that maybe I would pronounce it. But like, there's no U in there. There's no I in there. It's like, Aki TV called this man Maccabi. Blue Bloods calling this dude Makubu. Ego calls him MacBook Air. It's like, come on, man. Now I get it. That's basically their way of saying that, they didn't really give a shit about this fight. But like I said, there's a reason why they don't really care about this fight. But they're completely okay with the Rolly Romero versus Gervonta Tank Davis fight. It just is what it is. Like I said, at least when it comes to Canelo versus Makabu, do I believe that he has a huge chance to beat Canelo? No, but it is particularly interesting. Because there's a chance that Makabu could be about 20 pounds bigger than Canelo. I'm not sure, but we'll see what happens.
Eddie Hearn, he stated that he would much rather see Canelo Alvarez, if he's going to move up in weight, don't go up to cruiserweight, the 190-pound limit, because cruiserweight has changed from 200 pounds to 190. Okay, so he stated.
Well, I'm not sure if that's the whole cruiserweight division, or all in all, if that is just the WBC Bridgerweight, and I'm not sure if that's a guarantee that they're going to hold it at Bridgerweight, but we'll see what happens.
That he would much rather Canelo Alvarez go to 175. Light heavyweight, where he became a champion already at light heavyweight after he defeated former WBO light heavyweight world champion Ukrainian superstar boxer Sergey Crusher Kovalev. Okay, Canelo Alvarez.
I think you mean Russian superstar boxer. Sergey Kovalev is not Ukrainian.
He defeated Sergey Kovalev for Kovalev's WBO title. So with that said, Eddie Hearn is stating that he would much rather have Canelo Alvarez go up to light heavyweight, 175, recapture his belts. Now, Canelo Alvarez can make himself the mandatory challenger for the newly crowned WBO light heavyweight champion, Joe Smith Jr., and face off against Joe Smith Jr. also in May. Joe Smith Jr. has a fight coming up as well, and he beats Joe Smith Jr., and then he could look to unify the belts against undefeated, unified WBC, IBF light heavyweight world champion Artur Benavidez in September, and then look to fight Dimitri Bivol, who's the WBA light heavyweight champion, before the year is up. Now, with that said, the vested interest for Eddie Hearn obviously is Dimitri Bivol, because he's an Eddie Hearn fighter, matchroom fighter. But with that said, Canelo Alvarez could be focused on, or at least his trainer. See, Canelo Alvarez, he stated he'll go whatever direction his trainer, Eddie Reynoso, would like him to go in. Whatever direction he points him in, that's the direction Canelo Alvarez, he stated that he's going to go in. Okay, he's going to go and do whatever Eddie Reynoso feels is best for.
And I've already said this a multitude of times, but in my opinion, the two fighters that have the biggest chance of defeating Canelo Alvarez is either Dimitri Bivol or Artur Beterbiev. Dimitri Bivol especially, because Dimitri Bivol at his best, very quick feet, very good feet when it comes down to it, very fast hands, decent power as well. And these are going to be fighters that they're not going to be afraid to exchange with Canelo, at least at certain times, at least I would hope. So that's going to be very interesting to see how Canelo Alvarez, reacts to those fights, if he does face those guys, especially without a weight drain.
Canelo Alvarez to do. And Eddie Reynoso seems fixated on Canelo Alvarez facing off against Makubu at cruiserweight, becoming a 5-division champion. Well, if that's the case, then you can make for sure that Canelo Alvarez has seen his last days at 168. Canelo Alvarez goes up to 170.
We'll see about that. Like I said, I don't know if, a lot of people are taking a look at it and they're saying, oh, well, Canelo could be making a mistake. He may do what Roy Jones Jr. did. I don't think that Canelo Alvarez, if he's whatever weight that Canelo is going to face at right now, unless he, fights at 160, I don't think that he's going to add on a bunch of muscle or add on a bunch of weight. I don't think that he's going to do it, because I think he knows that Makabu, I think that he knows that, at least for him, without adding on any extra weight, it's at least for him a 50-50 fight, when it comes down to, without adding on any extra weight. To be honest with you, I think it would actually be worse for Canelo Alvarez to add on any extra muscle or any extra weight. I don't think that he's going to do what Roy Jones Jr. did, because Canelo Alvarez is already a person that, in my opinion, he's never really had an A-grade gas tank anyway. So when you're a person that already doesn't have that gift of great conditioning, like what a Tyson Fury or Terrence Crawford or Vasyl Lomachenko has, adding on extra muscle at times, that's actually a detriment. It can actually be a huge detriment.
190 to the
That's why Deontay Wilder was so busted tired in the Tyson Fury fight.
cruiserweight limit.
That's why, in my opinion, a lot of people, they say, "Oh, well, it was a good thing for Deontay Wilder to add on those extra pounds of muscle." I didn't think it was a good. I didn't think it was a good idea last time. I didn't think it was a good idea this time, because I've always noticed about Deontay Wilder, he does not have an A-grade gas tank. He just never has.
There's no way Canelo Alvarez.
And the worst thing you actually can do for your gas tank is to add extra pounds of muscle and extra pounds of bulk.
Is coming back down to 168 at all to campaign at the 168-pound limit. He's just not going to do that, okay? So with that said, it looks like Canelo Alvarez could be headed up to cruiserweight and putting the JERMALL CHARLO fight in his rearview mirror. Now, we know Eddie Reynoso, he stated...
I'm not going to say that he's put in his rearview mirror. I mean, sort of speaking, I guess, if you want to say that, but what I will say is that I think that he is putting it aside. I'm not going to say he's put in his rearview mirror. I think that Canelo knows that beating JERMALL CHARLO and David Benavidez, especially, that those are two fights that are worth it. And like I said, he's expressed interest in those fights. I just don't know if he's going to face them right now. But if he does take out JERMALL CHARLO, more than likely, which he probably would, all in all, if he were to beat JERMALL CHARLO in his next fight, he's probably going to go straight after David Benavidez. And after that, then he's probably going to go after one of the cruiserweights, whoever holds the WBC title or whoever holds one of the titles. And then after that, he's probably going to go after light heavyweight. But the big question is, what is the move he is going to make next? Because Canelo can pretty much do whatever the hell he wants to do at this point in time. Almost all of boxing is behind him. I won't say all of boxing. Of course, there's, certain critics when it comes down to it. But once again, for those of us overall that realize, all in all, Canelo Alvarez and the resume that he is a great boxer. It is what it is. And right now, he runs the game.
On a few occasions that,
Let me also talk about another fight that I believe is highly possible. Jake Paul. Now, from what I hear, Jake Paul, he may face Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. And if just like I said with Ben Askren, if there actually was a professional fighter that was going to lose to Jake Paul, it was going to be Ben Askren. Let me say this about Chavez Jr. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who has this opinion about Chavez Jr., especially the Mexicans. They've been on that dude's ass overall ever since he quit, I believe, against not even ever since he quit, but ever since he looked like shit against Canelo Alvarez. They've been on his ass. I'll tell you what, man, some of the Mexican fans, boy, if they think you're a quitter or, if you don't live up to their standards, they're on your ass. I've seen the same thing with Victor Ortiz and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Those guys are looked at as disgraces in their eyes. But anyways, when it comes down to it, man, just when it comes down to it, Jake Paul may possibly face Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. next. And let me tell you what, that's a 50-50 fight. And certain people may take a look at me like I'm crazy. Certain people overall may agree with me because Chavez Jr., he's not someone that I really consider as a huge viable threat towards, a lot of, decent fighters out there. And Jake Paul, like I said, I don't think he's necessarily A-grade skilled, obviously, but he's more talented, actually, than what, of course, a lot of people give him credit for. You can tell that with the few amount of years that he's been sparring and boxing, that he does have some natural talent, and, of course, he is very athletically gifted. So that'd be a very decent fight. If he actually were able to defeat a Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., and then maybe defeat another boxer that even if they may not have a big name, that Canelo versus Jake Paul fight may be closer than what people think.
JERMALL CHARLO is definitely an option. He stated that this time, but he said that they're weighing out all their options. It doesn't seem like that Canelo Alvarez and Eddie Reynoso, more so Eddie Reynoso, is too interested in fighting and Canelo Alvarez fighting JERMALL CHARLO. Maybe it's the style matchup. Maybe it's the physicality of JERMALL CHARLO, the size, the strength, the youth, the speed.
I don't really think it's any of those things. I think that when I just take a look at Canelo Alvarez, like I said, he knows that JERMALL CHARLO and David Benavidez are very, very good fighters, but he doesn't take a look at them, in my opinion, as gigantic threats. It just is what it is. When he takes a look at them, he basically says, oh, they're pretty much what I've already faced before. Like they're no different. Like JERMALL CHARLO, he's pretty much no different from like a Danny Jacobs. Is he, more skilled than what a Danny Jacobs is? Yeah, in my opinion, yeah. But that's pretty much what he's going to be. He's just going to be another Danny Jacobs for Canelo. And Canelo at this point in time in his career, it may even be worse for JERMALL CHARLO because JERMALL CHARLO, when it comes down to it, I mean, his movement may even be worse than that of a Danny Jacobs.
athletic
And
ability.
Danny Jacobs, who knows, he may even actually have more punching power than that of a JERMALL CHARLO. Danny Jacobs, a lot of people don't remember, but that dude is a real good puncher.
JERMALL CHARLO. He doesn't like JERMALL CHARLO is a big, strong middleweight, and he'll be even bigger, stronger super middleweight. Okay, and so it seems like Eddie Reynoso is not too eager to put Canelo Alvarez in the ring with JERMALL CHARLO for whatever reason. Okay, and Eddie Reynoso is.
This is just my personal opinion, and of course, certain people are going to disagree. I don't think that Canelo Alvarez or Eddie Reynoso really, excuse me, I don't really think they take a look at JERMALL CHARLO and say, wow, that's just something that Canelo Alvarez, that's just an all-time great fight for him. I don't think that's what he takes a look at it as. Like I said, I think Canelo was worried about history right now. Don't get me wrong, getting a win over JERMALL CHARLO, it still would be good for the history books. But, I mean, that would be pretty much like, when Errol Spence Jr. defeated Danny Garcia or Sean Porter. Like, it's a very, very good win, but no one takes a look at JERMALL CHARLO. At least I don't personally take a look at him that way and say, oh my God, you beat JERMALL CHARLO, like that's first ballot Hall of Famer. Like I just don't take a look at JERMALL CHARLO that way. Now don't get me wrong, he probably would be a Hall of Famer, but I would say that Paulie Malignaggi is probably a Hall of Famer in boxing because the standards for Hall of Fame in boxing is just different. So it is what it is. There's a lot of fighters, in my opinion, that could debatably make the Hall of Fame. JERMALL CHARLO, I think, is a very decent boxer, but no one is going to take a look at JERMALL CHARLO way later on and say that, in my opinion, that he was an all-time great boxer. The boxers that Canelo Alvarez is going to be remembered for defeating, I mean, JERMALL CHARLO, if he were able to defeat him, of course, he's going to be one of those names that people remember, just like, people remember that Errol Spence was able to defeat Sean Porter or Danny Garcia. But at the end of the day, like I said, those guys, they're not really too far away from the Billy Joe Saunders or the Caleb Plants or the Callum Smith or the Danny Jacobs or any of those guys. The guys that really stick out on, Canelo's resume, those are the Gennady Golovkins, the Araceli Laras, the Miguel Cottos, those guys.
On record.
And of course, Danny Jacobs and Caleb Plant and all those guys, of course, they stick out as well. But like I said, a lot of those guys are in the same league. The only ones, in my opinion, that were in a different league compared to those guys were Lara and Golovkin.
That, he likes matchups that he favors them to win. Okay, he said that Mukubu is a style matchup and is a fight that is a winnable fight for Canelo Alvarez. So it's abundantly clear that Eddie Reynoso is playing matchmaker, and he's not trying to play matchmaker and put Canelo Alvarez in a situation where it's a 50-50 fight or Canelo Alvarez could simply lose. So Eddie...
And basically, this is the point. This is why I wanted to review this video. And I like Blue Blood, when it comes on. And now he is a part of the LDBC. We know that sometimes they can tend to be a pro-black cult. But I don't mind Blue's channel. Blue sometimes, he can have sometimes logical analyzations. But like I said, I just can't agree. Like I said, I don't take a look at JERMALL CHARLO as a 50-50 fight. I just don't take a look at it that way. When I take a look at Canelo Alvarez, I take a look at him, like I said, I look at him as on the level of anyone else in boxing right now. Like I said, Errol Spence Jr. versus Danny Garcia, or Terrence Crawford versus Danny Garcia, or Terrence Crawford versus Sean Porter, that's pretty much what Canelo versus Andrade, or Canelo versus Benavidez, or Canelo versus, Charlo would be, in my opinion. There's no boxers. If you're Canelo's own same size, I don't see you beating him. When you have a tremendous boxer like him, when you have a tremendous boxer like a Floyd Mayweather Jr. or a Manny Pacquiao or, a Canelo Alvarez, the majority of the time, if you're similar in size to them, you're not usually going to stand a great of a chance. It just is what it is, and Canelo is very similar. The only fighter that gave, Canelo in recent years a very, very tough run for his money, I'm talking about almost pulled off both fights, was Gennady Triple G Golovkin, who was similar in size. That was the only one. That's how we know that Gennady Golovkin was on a different level compared to the other fighters that Canelo was fought as of recently, because he's the only one that has, that can say that he's even pulled out even with a draw. So it is what it is.
Reynoso, he's on record, and he stated that I would love to put Canelo Alvarez in fights that are favorable for us to win. Mukubu is a fight that we can win. Okay.
Well, I don't think that he's saying all in all that he just wants to put Canelo Alvarez in cherry-picked fights. I think what he meant to say overall was that, and what he did probably say, but you may be mincing words, I'm not sure. But when it comes down to it, what he meant to say is that this is a great fight because it's a cruiserweight, and Mukubu is a realistic fight for Canelo Alvarez, a cruiserweight. So, of course, they're not... Like I said, I reviewed so many videos, and Boxing Eagle and Dante's Boxing Nation, they were saying, well, why not get in the ring with Alexander Usyk? Do you understand what that would be asking Canelo Alvarez to do? I mean, I don't even know how to make a comparison like that. That would be like literally Floyd Mayweather Jr. I mean, I literally don't even know how to compare it. I mean, I can't even compare that to like Marvin Hagler. That would almost be like Floyd Mayweather Jr. getting in the ring with Bernard Hopkins. like that's almost what it would be like. You know, it just is what it is. Someone who would be a good solid like 30 pounds bigger.
So, with that said, it looks like he likes that option, and it's a historic event for Canelo Alvarez. It'll make Canelo Alvarez a 5-division world champion. You know, it's a fight that most people deem. You saw Floyd Mayweather said Makubu is a guy that, you know, guys that are not even professionals in his gym have been working.
Right, but no offense against Floyd. All-time great fighter. A lot of respect for Floyd. But Floyd, like I said, he has some intentions to why I think he's talking trash on Canelo Alvarez right now. And one of those main reasons overall is because he knows that Canelo is going to get a push as the greatest fighter of all time later on. He just knows that, especially if he keeps winning. And if he's able to get a win in cruiserweight, people are going to take a look at him and say, wow, Canelo Alvarez was able to win titles all the way from 154 all the way to cruiserweight. Could Floyd Mayweather Jr. do that? Now, of course, in my opinion, that's not the best way to look at it because Floyd, of course, does not have the stature of a Canelo Alvarez. He's not the same build. But at the end of the day, that's what a lot of people are going to take a look at it as. Like I said, it's basically going to be like the Roy Jones Jr. syndrome. They're going to say, wow, you know, how many guys can we say won belts from 154 all the way to 200 pounds? I mean, that's almost something that is unheard of.
In sparring, and that he's a very winnable fighter.
I mean, that's kind of like what Roberto Duran and Tommy Hearns and, you know, some of those guys were able to do back in the day. You know, now, of course, they still lost some of their bigger fights when they went up in weight, but Roberto Duran was a person that was known as like a natural lightweight, and he was able to win belts all the way up at like 168 pounds. Do you know how insane that is? That's pretty much overall like what Canelo Alvarez is doing right now. That's why I don't have a problem with this fight.
Canelo Alvarez, opposed to Canelo Alvarez facing off against the JERMALL CHARLOs or the David Benavidez of the world. You know, those are fights that, you know, Canelo Alvarez are 50-50.
And like I said, it would be a different situation if I thought that Canelo was pulling this Gervonta Tank Davis or Mikey Garcia bullshit when it comes down to it. If he was like, oh, well, I'll fight this guy sooner or later, but, you know, now I'm going to go up and face the weakest champion available every single time. And those fighters, you know, they don't look to have a realistic chance. Like I said, when Mikey Garcia fought Sergey Lipinets, no one thought Sergey Lipinets really had a realistic chance to beat him. I'm not saying that there wasn't some people that thought maybe he was in the decent fight, but I never personally thought it. But it just is what it is. Like I said, I can usually tell all in all what is at least, you know, a 70-30 fight. In my opinion, the Makabu fight, probably 70-30 at least. Some people may say, well, I think it's like 90-10, 80-20. I wouldn't underestimate Makabu. Because Makabu, in my opinion, like I said, very big, you know, bigger over Canelo, longer reach when it comes down to it. And like I said, you know, these guys, they can try to tear down, you know, Makbuk Air, as Ego would say, oh, they want to, or you know, Makubu, Maccabi, you know, whatever the hell they want to call him. They can try to disrespect this dude all they want to, but at the end of the day, like I said, no, he's not an A-grade fighter, but this dude is he's a legitimate puncher. He's a person that is a legitimate cruiserweight. This is the person, like I said, it's a very interesting matchup for that reason. It's a chase for history.
Fights in many people's eyes. Those are fights that Canelo Alvarez.
But like I said, Canelo has already fought the Araceli Laras. He's already fought the Gennady Golovkins. And on top of that, he fought the Caleb Plants, the Danny Jacobs, you know, the Billy Joe Saunders, the Callum Smiths. Once again, would I love to see David Benavidez and JERMALL CHARLO? I would love to see them. But there's nothing to me that separates them really from those guys. Do I think that JERMALL CHARLO, and I guess I should mention Demetrius Andrade as well, you know, do I think that maybe you can debate that they're greater athletes? I mean, I guess. But at the end of the day, I don't see their boxing ability on such more of a higher level compared to those guys. Because if we really want to compare them, I just don't think they are. You know, a lot of people always, you know, say how great Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade is. But, I mean, is he really? I mean, if we really just want to get to the nitty-gritty of it and how truthful it is, like I said, you know, I've always said this for years. Everyone is always, you know, oh my God, Demetrius is so impressive. But every single time I've seen Demetrius Andrade, I've never seen the same magic that other people have seen. Maybe I'm not watching the right performances, but every performance I've always seen about Demetrius Andrade, all I thought he was a bigger, watered-down version of Araceli Lara. That's all I ever thought he was. It just is what it is. That's all I ever thought that he was. Now, maybe you can argue that he's a little bit more talented offensively, but I don't know. Like I said, Demetrius Andrade, he's a person that's just a little bit too sloppy. I don't think he has the punch resistance or the power to deal with Canelo Alvarez. And to be honest with you, I don't think he has the boxing ability. When I take a look at David Benavidez, like I said, very talented athletically. But it's not like he's some Mexican or Mexican American version of Roy Jones Jr. like people try to act like this kid, like if he faces Canelo, it's going to be a 50-50 matchup and he has a real chance of knocking him out. Those aren't the fights that are 50-50. Like I said, there's only two fights in the world right now, in my opinion, that are 50-50 with Canelo Alvarez. If we're talking about him anywhere from 160 to the cruiserweight level, that is either Dimitri Bivol or Artur Beterbiev. Those are the only ones that can handle Canelo Alvarez's power, possibly, and they have a decent amount of skills, and they overall may not be afraid to exchange with Canelo. That's how you're gonna have to beat Canelo. You're gonna have you're gonna have to exchange with him here and there. You're gonna have to try to back him up. You're gonna overall have to show a supreme amount of skills, but you're also gonna have to get him to respect you. And I don't think Canelo is going to respect David Benavidez, Demetrius Andrade, or JERMALL CHARLO that much, especially Charlo and Benavidez. Because no offense against those guys, decently great fighters, but when I just take a look at those guys, they just have too many holes. It just is what it is.
For sure could lose. So the boxing world, they got excited about Canelo Alvarez facing off against JERMALL CHARLO. And again, after that buzz, it was gaining traction, and the fans are going to start to call for Canelo Alvarez and JERMALL CHARLO.
I mean, you know what this would be like to me? This would be like if Floyd Mayweather Jr., if I really wanted to bitch, moan, and complain and say, oh, well, yeah, Floyd, he fought so many great fighters like Marquez and Cotto and, all those other guys. But you know what? He wanted, why don't he fight Barrera? Or why don't he fight Eric Morales? Those are 50-50 fights. To me, Barrera and Morales or Marquez, like, they're not really above the level of a Shea Mosley or Miguel Cotto. Like, to me, it's the same thing all in all, with these fighters. When I take a look at JERMALL CHARLO and David Benavidez, yeah, there's certain things that you can argue that they have over Caleb Plant or Callum Smith or Billy Joe Saunders, but there's certain things that you can argue that those three fighters have over those three as well. So it's just, to me, they're all, like I said, to me, they all have a 30% chance over Canelo. No more, no less.
Well, the traction has been slowed down. The brakes have been pumped. And it looks like Canelo Alvarez is going to put JERMALL CHARLO on the back burner. I don't foresee Canelo Alvarez facing off against JERMALL CHARLO because if he was, then Eddie Reynoso would have made it abundantly clear that that's the direction that they're going to go in facing JERMALL CHARLO. Okay, when they wanted to face Caleb Plant, when they wanted to face Billy Joe Saunders, they made it abundantly clear the direction that they were looking to go in. They made it abundantly clear who they wanted to fight and what they wanted to do. There wasn't any confusion as to what's going to be the next move for Canelo Alvarez when it came to Canelo Alvarez facing off against the likes of Billy Joe Saunders or Caleb Plant, but now Caleb Smith, that's a different situation because they were looking to actually face off against Avenue Durham for the vacant WBC title that was vacated by David Benavidez. But all parties involved was not on board with making that fight happen, although the WBC board, 31 out of 32 members, 31 voted that the fight between Avenue Durham and Canelo Alvarez should take place for the vacant WBC title. But Oscar De La Hoya, Golden Boy Promotions, the Zone wasn't on board with that. And so that's when Canelo Alvarez, he looked to get out of his contract.
Listen, what I'll say is this. Like I said, if Canelo is going to face Olunga Makabu next, he is going to have to face a very decent fighter after that. Now, whether that's JERMALL CHARLO, David Benavidez, Joe Smith Jr., Dimitri Bivol, or Beterbiev, doesn't matter. But it is going to have to be one of those fighters, or he is going to get a criticism from a certain amount of people. Because if you are going to continue being the number one pound for pound fighter, it's great that you're making history. But of course, Makabu, in my opinion, he is not an A-grade fight. A-grade fighter. But it is still a very decent fight because, of course, Canelo still is accomplishing history. So, of course, if you're assuming he's able to win that fight, there's no guarantee, in my opinion. But like I said, it'll be particularly interesting. But after that, Canelo will have to face top-tier competition. But if my guess more than likely, if he faces Makabu next, he's probably going to go straight after Joe Smith Jr.
And part ways from his longtime promoter, Oscar De La Hoya, Golden Boy Promotions. And that's exactly what he did. And afterwards, he fought Caleb Smith for the vacant WBC title, but it was a unification bout because Caleb Smith's WBA title was on board. So that gave Canelo Alvarez, the opportunity.
You guys remember all in all when these guys were talking about Callum Smith like he was the shit? They were talking about this dude all in all like he was a big threat, and then Canelo faces him and they're like, oh, he's cherry picking. Understandably, from what I heard, he didn't have a very impressive performance over John Ryder, but come on. We all know that Callum Smith at least is a decent fighter. I don't think all in all that, when I take a look at his skills, that he's an all-time great fighter. But hell, I don't think that Jermall Charlo, Demetrius Boo Andre, or David Benavidez are either.
To become a unified champion immediately at 168, and that's exactly what he did. And he beat Caleb Smith. So Caleb Smith wasn't initially on his radar. But after Caleb Smith, they made it abundantly clear they wanted to fight Avenue Durham and stay busy. There was no question what was next. He fought Avenue Durham. He beat Avenue Durham. Then they made it abundantly clear they wanted to fight Billy Joe Saunders and unify the belts. And that's exactly what they did. Then they made it abundantly clear they were going to go to whatever measures is what needed to make a fight happen for Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant, and that's exactly what they did. So if they truly wanted to fight JERMALL CHARLO, there wouldn't be any question or any confusion as to what's next for Canelo Alvarez.
Well, I think all in all that Canelo someone has JERMALL in his mind. I just don't know if he has pinpointed JERMALL CHARLO as his next opponent. Like I said, Canelo, when you're the number one pound for pound fighter in the face of boxing like Canelo is, you basically can take any option that you want to. So Canelo, he has a million options out there. And I think that Canelo, he's looking at it and he's basically saying, what is the best option for my career? What overall is going to put me in that discussion as debatably being one of the top 10, boxers of all time. And like I said, to me, he's getting there. Because, I've already said that he's in my top 25, top 30 boxers of all time anyway.
Because the plan has been all along since he beat Caleb Plant is to fight Mukubu at cruiserweight. So that's the only confusion came in was when Mukubu's mandatory challenger stood on his square and didn't take step aside money and stated that he wanted to fight with Mukubu. So that's the thing that held up the entire situation between Canelo Alvarez and Mukubu. So there's no confusion. He wants to go up to cruiserweight, and that's what he's going to do. He's going to wait and see if Mukubu is successful in his January 29th showdown. And if he is, then Canelo Alvarez will be facing him in May. But that's all I got for y'all. But one thing I would say, now, if that's the case, JERMALL CHARLO stated he was going to go up to 168, right? So if JERMALL CHARLO goes up to 168, we should see JERMALL CHARLO versus David Benavidez next. So let's see how this unfolds and plays out. But that's all I got.
That'd be a great fight, but JERMALL CHARLO don't want to face David Benavidez next. He's also not interested in Demetrius Boo Andre because JERMALL CHARLO wants that Canelo Alvarez lottery ticket. I mean, I've always liked JERMALL CHARLO. JERMALL CHARLO, I've always had a little bit of a soft spot for him because, I've always been a person that has always been heavily annoyed when certain people always try to push certain narratives or they always underestimate certain people when it comes down to it. And JERMALL CHARLO is one of those fighters early on in his career. And I think that he's actually turned out better than what most people expected, better than what I expected. But when I take a look, when I just take a look at the fighters around Canelo Alvarez's weight classes, and when I take a look at Canelo Alvarez, like I said, I see an all-time great fighter. Now, once again, he's going to have to consistently face top-tier contenders to prove all in all that he still deserves to be in that number one pound-for-pound spot. But when I just take a look at Canelo Alvarez, if we're, this is a weird comparison, I guess, if I want to compare it like this. But let's talk about food here for a second. If you want to talk about going out to eat or like going to restaurants, let's say that one of your favorite foods is a burger. Canelo Alvarez is that gourmet burger. He's basically that one restaurant that you go out to eat, whether you want to, go to Buffalo Wild Wings and have one of their good burgers, or if you go to Red Robin, you go there to pay high-end money when it comes down to it because they, they're the gourmet burgers. They're the main burgers that are the top-notch burgers, the best burgers in town. But when I take a look at JERMALL CHARLO or Caleb Plant or, Demetrius Boo Andre, David Benavidez, they're a good burger, but what they are, they're like the Burger King or McDonald's burger. that's what they are, or the Hardee's burger or something like that. They're not overall on the same level. Now, once again, that doesn't mean to me that I still don't want to see those fights. But like I said, to me, Canelo Alvarez, this narrative, he's ducking JERMALL CHARLO and David Benavidez 50-50 fights. I don't see how those are going to be 50-50 fights. And when I take, like I said, I can't get after Canelo Alvarez too much if he's going up to cruiserweight to face Olunga Makabu, and then after that going after the dangerous 175-pounders who are significantly bigger than him and have very, very good power. And some of them very decent skills. I can't bitch, moan, and complain about that. Because like I said, it'd be different if he was an Errol Spence Jr. and like, the Terrence Bud Crawford fight's right in front of you and maybe Errol Spence turns that fight down, let's just say hypothetically. That'd be different because there's pretty much no greater fight that's going to earn you a greater amount of money. And Terrence Bud Crawford clearly is so much better than any other contemporary out there just compared to Errol Spence Jr. But, Canelo, when you talk about him, just the guys in his weight divisions, I don't take a look at JERMALL CHARLO, Demetrius Andrade, or David Benavidez as these super, super huge threats. They're all threats in their own way. But I don't really see them above Caleb Plant. I don't really see them above Billy Joe Saunders or Callum Smith really in that way. I just don't see it. I've never seen it. I still don't see it. That's not me saying that they don't have a chance. But I said the same thing with Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, and Caleb Plant. I all gave those fighters a 30% chance over Canelo. And I give JERMALL CHARLO, David Benavidez, and Demetrius Bobo Andrade all the same amount of chance. Like I said, there's only 3 boxers in mind that if we want to talk about all the way from the 160-pound weight class all the way up to cruiserweight when it comes down to, there's only 3 fighters. 2 fighters that I'd maybe give a 50-45% chance over Canelo when it comes down to possibly beat him. And there's only 1 fighter on earth that we talk about overall that I would actually favor to beat Canelo Alvarez, and that is a fully rehydrated Alexander Usyk. That's it. That's the only one. It just is what it is.
For y'all, make sure you hit the like button, drop a comment in the comment section.
But anyways, I guess that's really about it for this video. But like I said, we will see overall where Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez goes from here. It should be very particularly interesting. But like I said, if he does go after Olunga Makabu, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. Now, of course, after that, when it comes down, like I said, he'll have to go after one of these other decent champions like a Joe Smith Jr. or a Beterbiev or Bivol, or maybe he can face a Charlo or a David Benavidez. He will have to go after one of those fighters, after that. But like I said, I can't have a big problem with this Makabu fight because Canelo has already gotten so many elite fighters out of the way. And, like I said, Charlo, Andrade, and Benavidez, to me, they just don't really, they stick out just as much as Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, and Caleb Plant did. It just is what it is, But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.